usually split up between the beginning and the end of the service. But last week I talked through probably the first half of them. And I'm just going to do a quick run through. If you want to hear the whole thing, the audio of it is up on the website if you wanted to hear it. But let's say this together. This is Exodus 31:12. The Lord said to Moses, "Tell the Israelites, you must observe my Sabbath, for it is a sign between me and you throughout your generations, so that you will know that I am Adonai who sets you apart." And we talked about the different things along with that. The observe, shamar, to keep and guard, celebrate, have charge of, to watch for, or to treasure up. And those types of things, and we looked at it. I didn't mention it so much last week, but it's the Sabbath is plural in this first verse, and it's our keeping of it, it's our observation of it that is the sign, because the sign is singular. For it is a sign. It's our observation of it that is the sign that makes it there. So we talked about observe, we talked about what a sign means. It's a signal or a distinguishing mark. How it's first used, this word oath, is in Genesis 1, where it's the stars and the sun and the moon are the signs for the marking of the Moedim, the days, the festivals. But it's also used here in Genesis 4 with the mark that's the sign on Cain, to mark and distinguish him. Was it for his punishment, or was it also somewhat mostly for his protection? So that the other people would see and recognize and not have vengeance upon him. So even in the moment of punishment, God was showing grace by putting this mark on him. And then how long was it supposed to last? It was supposed to last for all generations. The purpose was so we may know. And through the keeping of it, the observation of it, he sets us apart. He makes us holy. So this is then verse 16. The Israelites must observe the Sabbath, celebrating it throughout their generations as a perpetual covenant. Now this one is where it moves to singular, the Sabbath, the weekly event. And it goes on, let's say this together. It is a sign between me and Bnei Israel forever. For in 6 days Adonai made the heavens and the earth, but on the seventh day he ceased from work and rested. Celebrate is this word of thought, to fashion, to produce or accomplish. It also has the idea of preparation or preparing. And it's that word that's also used in 1:7 of God making the expanse. He produced it, he prepared it. Then the fruit trees of the earth, they also bear or prepare or accomplish the fruit. So that's how that one is first used. The perpetual is the word olam. It's a long duration. Antiquity, it can be the past and the future. We talked about that for a little while last time. So it's going backwards and forwards. So in keeping the Sabbath, it's connecting you to what has come before, but it's also connecting you to what is ahead and what is coming. So it has that indefinite or unending future. And it was first used in Genesis 3, where it's talking about not letting them eat of the tree of life, that they might eat of it and live forever in this state of indefinite or unending future where they're forever broken and there's no chance or possibility of redemption at that point. So it's actually he did a favor in not letting us eat of the tree of life at this point, because we would be forever broken. So this is giving us an opportunity for redemption. And it's tied to the idea of creation. It's also tied to God's own example. We talked a good bit about that. Let's say this together. This is Ezekiel 36. Moreover, I will give you a new heart. I will put a new spirit within you. I will remove the stony heart from your flesh and give you a heart of flesh. I will put my ruach within you Then I will cause you to walk in my laws, so you will keep my rulings and do them. Then you will live in the land that I gave to your fathers. You will be my people, and I will be your God. So it's their keeping, their observing, in this point, is even tied to their staying in the land. That's one of the reasons why they were sent off into exile, because they had stopped keeping His commands, stopped keeping the Sabbath, stopped living by His Torah, and that's one reason that the exile took place. The cause you to, the asah, to fashion, accomplish, produce, it's that idea again. To walk, we talked about these. To live in, to walk in, to proceed in these types of things. It's a manner of life. The first time it's used is in Genesis 2:4 about the river and its course and its direction of flowing. Then in chapter 3, verse 8, they heard the sound of the Lord walking in the garden. He's proceeding in this. He's seeking them to walk with Him, to live and proceed in life with Him. But at this point, what had already happened? They had already kind of fallen. They had already lost the ability to walk that closely with Him. And so some life drastically changed for everybody involved. We talked about the word for cause you to walk in my laws or statutes. This is the word chok. An ordinance or a limit. It's something prescribed. It can be talked about a portion as an allotment of land. His rulings and ordinances as the mishpat, the judgments or decisions in the terms and ideas of judgment, of what is right, of deciding a case, things like that. We talked about that. And then again, for what purpose? That they might live in the land, that they might be His people, that He would be our God. These are the signs that designate those things. That is proof, or that's evidence. I think we talked a little bit about in the sense of a courtroom, and you hear that phrase in the church from time to time of, if you were ever put on trial for being a Christian, would there be enough evidence to convict you? Right? Well, this is that kind of thing. This is what the signs are supposed to be. The commands, our judgments of living right, they are some of the evidences that we are His people and He is our God. That's what these things are about. And so when we as a people disregard His Torah, disregard living in His way, we're actually diminishing the kind of evidence that there is that we are His. And I don't think we really would want to do that. The way we don't understand the implications of what we say when we say like things like Christ did away with the Torah, or that's not for us, or whatever else. We're actually removing the evidence that we belong to Him. And this is kind of where we're starting today. So this is Jeremiah 31. It says, behold, the days are coming. You'll say this with me. It is a declaration of Adonai, when I will make a new covenant with the house of Israel and with the house of Judah. Not like the covenant I made with their fathers in the day I took them by the hand to bring them out of the land of Egypt. For they broke my covenant, though I was a husband to them. It is a declaration of Adonai. But this is the covenant I will make with the house of Israel after those days. It is a declaration of Adonai. I will put my Torah within them. Yes, I will write it on their hearts. I will be their God, and they will be my people. Again, it's tied to identity and such. By having this in our hearts, He is our God, we are His people. It's the same concept. No longer will each teach his neighbor or each his brother, saying, Know Adonai, for they will all know me, from the least of them to the greatest. It is a declaration of Adonai. For I will forgive their iniquity, their sin I will remember no more. Before I really get going, some of the powerful things in this is when our sins are forgiven is really when the Torah is put on our hearts. That's when we can live by all of those things. But what's interesting here It's when the Torah is on our hearts. If we really knew and understand and lived by the Torah, then we would really know Him better. Because these are His rulings, these are His ways. This is how He defines His character, His nature, His holiness. If we know His Torah, then we would know Him. Yes?
Well, over the years of doing the Torah in a large family setting where we don't separate the children and stuff, it's amazing how much that even very small children pick up.
Yes.
And they know the Scripture on a whole different level than I've ever seen in my whole life. So, in fact, it was shocking when I first started. I was embarrassed as to how much the kids knew because I was new and didn't know as much. I was like, really?
Yeah. So. Yeah, exactly. So the kids pick up on things by being, as the family, because the family is the center of discipleship in the Scriptures. So
I can see why that would be.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. All right, so, I guess I didn't have the little divisions on there. So this one, in this phrase, I will make a new covenant with who? Gee, it's nice to have all the answers already spelled out. I hope I didn't do that for the rest of it. Who broke the old one? Obviously, the Israelites did. This is a covenant which they broke. He's identifying where the fault in the covenant is. Is the fault with the terms of the covenant? No. The fault is not with God. The fault is not with what He said or what He asks us to live by. The fault is the fact that we are broken. And the fault is with us that we sin and break that covenant. And yet, in spite of that, in spite of the fact that there's nothing wrong with who God is, there's nothing wrong with the terms of His covenant, and that He's not even the one who broke it, who died on the terms of the old. He did. Yeshua did. He died as the innocent one in our place. So is the covenant fulfilled? Yes, because the wages of sin is death, and someone has died. We experience death all the time anyway. But in terms of, is the covenant fulfilled? Yes. The bridegroom died for us. The innocent one died in our place so that we might have our sins forgiven, so that our iniquities can be dealt with. Because just our death doesn't fix the problem. Us dying doesn't fix anything. It takes the only one who is perfect in the terms of the covenant to be able to fix it. He's the one that can take care of the terms and all of that. Man, I thought I fixed it. So how is it different? The old one is more external. It's on the outside. It's written on the tablets of stone. It's the way he talks about it. I will take the Torah and I will write it where? Not on new stone tablets, but he writes it here. He writes it in our heart. And after Ezekiel, our heart of stone has been changed to a heart of flesh. So it goes from the outside to the inside, the external to the internal. And the purpose is, again, that He will be our God and they will be His people. And we will truly know the Lord. When we truly are able to live by His Word, able to live by His Torah, then we will really know Him. And that's where, our forgiveness and our sin has been dealt with and redeemed. We've already talked about that a little bit already. So this is Isaiah chapter 58. And this is the one where we're going to be camping on. Does anybody have any comments or thoughts on Jeremiah 31 before we move on? Yeah.
Well, I had a couple of thoughts. For the groom to take the adulterous bride back, he would need to resurrect from the dead as if a new groom taking the bride, because following the covenant that was put up for us, the groom couldn't take back an adulterous bride. That would be iniquity
Right. Yeah. The command of that he could not remarry her again. That's part of the Torah. That's where Paul talks about it in Romans, about the woman is bound by that so long as her husband is living. So yeah, that's a very powerful connection. So yeah, death is a part of it. Yeah.
When we look at the fact that they were written on stone tablets, there's it really, one of the purposes for that was to show its enduring nature.
Yes.
Its enduring eternal nature. Stone was always something that remained, continued throughout time. And God, from the get-go, when he wrote them on stone tablets, says these words should be in your heart.
Yes, he did.
It was unfortunate that they never got internalized. They were supposed to.
Mm-hmm.
It did by some, but by Israel in a corporate sense, they failed the test.
But we already had a stone heart at that point. And it would take some chiseling to get those words in there.
There were some that had a tender and pliable heart, a small remnant usually within the.
Absolutely, yes.
Tie this a little bit to the Ezekiel passage that talks about the Spirit and giving us the Spirit, His Spirit.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the New Testament tells us that the Holy Spirit, one of the Holy Spirit's jobs is to transform us into the image of the Son, to transform us into the image of Yeshua. And Yeshua, who kept the law perfectly, if part of the job of the Spirit, according to the Ezekiel passage, is to cause us to keep His rulings and His law and His Torah, then that is part of the process. That's discipleship. That's part of the process of transforming us into the image of the Son.
Mm-hmm.
And that's, like I said, that's discipleship.
Right.
That's
So,
discipleship.
one of the roles of the Holy Spirit in the life of the believer is to get us to want to even have a desire to keep His Torah. And that's something we've somewhat forgotten about and negated. Yes.
Her saying that reminded me of it's a book, and I know people are doing it particularly this time during the time to hour, where I'm watching some of the Jewish teachers and stuff. It's so different because they go through this process of working out, sort of like what we would say, work out our salvation with fear and trembling. They're working out different character issues, and they're memorizing and doing all these things. And I look at it and I'm like, I tried doing stuff that way, and you might, if you work really hard, have a little bit of success. But if you ask Yeshua to do it in you, it's so much easier. And I'm like, wow, you can really see the difference. And
Of trying to live without the Spirit.
Right.
Yes.
It's still the same principle. We still need to fix those issues. But the difference in having the Holy Spirit in us and asking, would you work this out of me because I don't have it?
Yeah.
Sure.
I can concur with what McKip's saying, because when I was in Texas, I was going to college, and I swear, when I learned about fasting and prayer and all of that, it's like my grades were like here, whereas before I was like a BC student in college. I was just getting by kind of thing. But
You were in school for BC, before Christ?
before Chase.
Before Chase, okay. Very good. All right, let's say this together. This is Isaiah 58. It says, if you keep from desecrating the Sabbath, from doing whatever you want on my holy day, if you call the Sabbath a delight and the holy day of the Lord honorable, if you honor it, not going your own ways, seeking your own pleasure or idle talk, then you will delight yourself in the Lord, and I will make you ride over the heights of the land, and let you enjoy the heritage of your father Jacob. The mouth of the Lord has spoken. Now, I don't have all of the notes in here as I would like, and this one's one that I know a lot of people debate about and it causes a lot of confusion on. The idea of your own pleasure is the word chafetz. It's the delight, the pleasure, the things that you long for, the things that you take delight in, and are our wants and our desires and our thoughts, are they always mirroring and reflecting His? No, they don't. As we talked about a little bit earlier with Peter, we have some of those cravings that are not pleasing to Him and honoring to Him. But not going your own pleasure, doing those things that make you happy necessarily. It's supposed to keep you focused on the things that He enjoys or that makes Him happy and such. So whatever you want, the things that are not set apart, not holy, and you contrast that to the things that He wants. And those things are the ones that are more set apart. This is another one of the first examples where it's used is 1 Samuel 15. Has the Lord as much delight in burnt offerings? And do we know that there are times that He is pleased with the offerings, but we also know that there are times that He's not. And the difference oftentimes is what? It's what's going on in here, in the one that's making the offering, determines whether or not it's something that He delights in. So it gives you the sense of, can you keep the Sabbath even in a way that does not delight Him? Yeah.
Just think, if somebody was taking a sacrifice and they didn't have the right heart, they just murdered that poor animal.
Yeah, for nothing.
Yeah.
So, that's the thing that we need to keep in mind, even in seeking to follow the Torah and keeping Sabbath and things of that sort, is that if we don't do it with the right heart and the right attitude ourselves, then we're wasting our time. Not that there's anything wrong with His Sabbath, or there's anything wrong with His Torah. It's wrong with the attitude in which we are approaching these things. Our own pleasures in that regard. The word delight is the word omed. And how do we use that word in contemporary world? Yeah, we usually talk about that in like the food and the lunch. After you've been, after your fellowship, is it after or before, or does it matter?
After.
Typically after, isn't it? So after you've been sitting there for hours upon hours and upon hours, listening to this guy drone on and on and on with his teachings, as you're supposed to be feeding on the Word, and your stomach gets a little bit louder and louder and louder, right?
It's ready for dessert.
Yeah. So that's kind of that sense. But it's those things that are the exquisite delight, the pleasantness, and even in Isaiah 13, it's talked about in terms of like these luxurious palaces that they're getting to stay in, the highest quality of things. Doing whatever you delight on my holy day. If you keep the Lord honorable, if you treat it honorable, it's the word kabad. I'm going to turn over there because I keep trying to. What's that? Heavy and weighty, yes. And to be rich or glorious, but it can be positive or negative. The first time it's used is Genesis 18. Their sin is exceedingly kabad. It's heavy. It's weighty. It's grave. So this is how that word can be used in a negative context. And whereas we want to treat the Sabbath, the holy day of the Lord, make it heavy, make it weighty, make it kabad, rich or glorious, in a positive way. Yes?
It's interesting because kabad is an Orthodox term. They have an organization called the kabad.
Mm-hmm.
And, we are amazed oftentimes by how the Jewish people have such a focus and a fervor in what they do and what they believe. But we have a deeper focus as believers, that we have Yeshua, that we recognize that God sent Yeshua,
Mm-hmm.
the righteous one.
We should have a deeper and weightier understanding. I don't know that we always
I think those
do.
are completely two different words, though.
Yeah,
The kabod and one actually means to be devout,
Okay.
and which I think may start with a cat instead of a coat.
Okay. Thank you.
But even words that sound alike can have similar meanings.
Yes. Phonetically, they are related.
Yeah, phonetically.
Yeah. But anyway, so that's where that one is. I thought I had these. So does that mean that you can't do anything or enjoy anything on the Sabbath? No. For one thing, hopefully in our maturity, we should enjoy coming together, and we should enjoy praising Him. We should enjoy the fellowship that we have with those that seek after Him. Now, again, you get all the answers ahead of time, so it's cheating. Yeshua was accused of breaking the Sabbath, and are these true accusations? I mean, over and over again, his confrontations with the leadership was an accusation. Typically you're breaking the Sabbath. So are those true?
According to whose authority?
According to whose authority? And so the distinction oftentimes is the matter of the oral tradition versus what is written, right? So many times that's the nature of the argument, because with the oral tradition, almost every rabbi or each teacher would have his own type of tradition to keep it. And Yeshua's practice so often was he would oftentimes break the oral tradition or a particular teacher's oral tradition and point them back to the written. And I mean, there's instances in cases where he would do things specifically that the oral tradition said not to do. I know it's been mentioned up there at River of Praise and things that the whole idea of spitting in dirt and making mud is specifically forbidden in the oral tradition, and yet Yeshua does that on purpose, and then specifically tells somebody to pick up your mat and go, and things like that as a demonstration. So he was doing things intentionally that would be in violation of what they said not to do, but they were oftentimes the things that were either added, the layers upon which we don't want to break the Sabbath, so how do we not do that? Well, we do that by not doing this, and then in order to not do that, let's not do this. And so we just keep kind of adding layer upon layer upon layer to where the outer layer of the thing is seen as a violation of the inner core thing. So that was a lot of the issue. And Yeshua oftentimes pointed them back to the letter of the law and the contrast of the letter of the law and the spirit of the law. What is it intending to say? Look at, if y'all have your Bibles, y'all want to flip over these. These are Matthew 12. And I'm going to be looking at a few different examples here of different things. So this is Matthew 12. He's going through the grain fields on Shabbat. His disciples become hungry. They pluck the heads of grain and eat. Then the Pharisees get mad. They say, look, your disciples are doing what is not permitted on the Sabbath. And he goes into talking about that story about David. As he is becoming hungry, he goes into the tabernacle. He eats the bread that's not permitted. And so he's making a point about that, even though it's only for the priest, the Kohanim. Verse 5 says, or haven't you read in the Torah that on the Sabbath, on Shabbat, the Kohanim, the priests in the temple, break Sabbath and yet are innocent? How are they breaking Sabbath? in the temple? Are they getting sweaty? I mean, are they having to do a lot of stuff? It's a lot of hard work. I mean, they're doing the sacrifices. They're carrying things around the animal carcasses. They're draining the blood. They're having to dig out the ashes. They're doing all kinds of things to make the process of the temple function. And yet, what does Yeshua say? Are they held as if they're breaking the Torah by doing all of that work? No, they're not. They are innocent because we'll get to that in just a minute. Even though they are doing all kinds of work and sometimes very hard work, they are still considered innocent. In John chapter 5, we have another kind of, keep that spot in Matthew because we'll be coming back to it. But in John chapter 5, you see another example of that. After this, there was a Jewish feast, and Yeshua went up to Jerusalem. It doesn't name this feast, but it's one in which the men are required to go to. So it's likely something like Shavuot, which is upcoming. He heals a man. This is at the pool of Bethsaida. Nobody is here to put me in the pool when the water is stirred up. So Yeshua tells him, get up, pick up your mat, and walk. So skipping the whole go into the water thing. He is healed. He takes up his mat. He starts walking around. Now that day was the Sabbath. Of course, what that brings out the accusers. It's Sabbath. It's not you are not permitted to carry your mat. Now, they would typically come down pretty hard on him, but he answered, the man who made me well told me to pick up your mat and walk. So he's saying, basically, in giving that answer, he's saying, wait a minute, which one of you guys has more authority to tell me what to do? The ones who say, don't pick it up, but you can't heal my body? Or the one who can heal my body, who tells me to pick it up? Which one of you has greater authority in that man's life? Obviously, it's the one who can heal his body. And so, of course, they're trying to find out who it is. He doesn't even really know who he is. It said the man who had been healed didn't know who it was, for Yeshua had slipped away into the crowd in that place. Afterward, Yeshua finds him in the temple. He said to him, look, you've been healed. Stop sinning so that nothing worse happens to you. The man left and told the Judean leaders that it was Yeshua. You kind of wonder, well, why did he go back and tell them who he was? But you kind of wonder, it's like, well, I don't want to be in trouble with these guys because they're the recognized authority. But, yeah, it was him. You got issues, it's not with me, it's with him. He's the one that said it. And yet, so that's what he's doing there. Look up then in verse 17. 16. Because Yeshua was doing these things on the Sabbath, the Judean leaders started persecuting him. But Yeshua said to them, my Father is still working, and I also am working. For this reason, the Judean leaders kept trying even harder to kill him, because he was not only breaking Sabbath, and again, was he really breaking Sabbath? No. He was breaking their rules and expectations of things, but also calling God his own Father, making himself equal with God. So he's equating what he is doing. Yeshua is saying how God works on the Sabbath is how I work on the Sabbath. And they understood him completely, that he was, in their mind, committing blasphemy. And it would be blasphemy if it weren't true. Yes?
Well, those are the Hebrew words for the kind of work done in the sanctuary and done in the field are two different words. But I'd be curious what the Hebrew would be on that.
Sure.
Well, actually, we know that one of them's a boat, and the other one is actually, you had it up last week. I can't remember exactly what it is.
I can't recall right offhand. But in any event, Yeshua is basically saying the work, obviously when God says in creation back in Genesis, on the seventh day God rested, right? Does that mean He didn't do anything?
That's when you have that.
Okay. So if God stopped doing everything, what would happen to this universe? It'd be done. We wouldn't be here. So He is still sustaining things. He is still holding things in their place. He is still working, but He is not creating, He's not doing new things and such. So He is still operating and functioning, and and a lot of times when things need to happen in a special way, like a miracle, He'll do it. And service, yeah. And so Yeshua, in saying that my Father is at work, He is working right now, even on the Sabbath. And the kind of things that He does, that's what I do. And that's a bold statement to make. And of course, they have issues and take issues with that. Then look over in John chapter 7, verse 21. These are just some of these confrontations. Chapter 7, verse 21. This is where He's in the temple. He's about halfway through the feast. Verse 21 says that Yeshua answered. He's saying, hasn't Moses given you the Torah, yet none of you keeps it? So he's throwing it back at them. Why are you trying to kill me? And they're like, who's trying to kill you? No one's trying to kill you. And of course, were they planning it? I mean, they weren't literally trying to stab him in that moment, but were they trying to figure out how they could get away with it? Yeah. Yeshua answered, I did one good work, and all of you are amazed, because Moses has given you circumcision, though it's not from Moses, but from the patriarchs. You circumcise a man on the Sabbath. If a man receives circumcision on Shabbat, so that the Torah of Moses may not be broken, why are you angry that I healed a man's whole body on Sabbath? Do not judge by appearance, but judge righteously. Okay? What's amazing here, so y'all know the premise. A baby is born, and the Torah says what happens on the 8th day. So he's supposed to be circumcised to enter into the community. Well, if that 8th day happens on a Sabbath, they're going to do it anyway. And the way that he words these things here is, so the Torah may not be broken, why are you angry that I healed a man's whole body? The way he phrases that to me is fascinating. Because in performing the circumcision on the child, he's talking about it in terms of healing part of the body. So he's talking about the circumcision as an act of healing in their eyes. And I had never really caught that before. It's healing because they're being brought into the terms of the covenant. So even though they're making a cut, a doctor makes an incision, but the goal is not to do more damage. The goal is to heal and to make someone whole. And he's saying, what you do on a small part of the body on the 8th day to not break the Torah, I am doing for the whole person. I am making the whole person well, the whole body well. And that's the kind of work, if you find this little thing acceptable on the Sabbath, then this bigger thing is even more acceptable on the Sabbath. Does that make sense?
There's nothing easy, peaceful, or painless about circumcision.
I don't remember.
I was there in Daniel.
Well, they say though when the 8th day is very, very important for design reasons. So
Yes.
It would be a whole lot different.
It's given the babies had a little bit of time for their immune system to start kicking in. They've been receiving more from the mother. So if you try to do it beforehand, it'd be more likely to get an infection, from what I understand.
Typically, that happens exactly on the 8th day. I've heard.
under the blood clot, the clotting of the blood. But that's probably because of, back to what you said, it's been able to nourish from its mom for those 7 days, and it's actually built up antibodies, and its blood is able to clot properly.
Yeah. So, anyway, if these things, some things can be done on Sabbath and be acceptable. Yes.
I don't want to get into too much detail here, but there's pretty good indication that most of these arguments that he's having with the Pharisees are with the school of Shabbat.
Yes.
Because, in fact, when he goes in, and it says he goes into the house of a synagogue leader, it's probably most likely that he literally went into the school of Shabbat, because they called those school houses.
Okay.
And
that makes sense.
And he asked him a question. He said, is it lawful to heal on the Sabbath day? Knowing exactly what they believe.
So you're saying it was a philosophical challenge. Philosophical challenge from one school to another kind of a thing?
Because Hillel would have not had a problem with it.
Yeah. So then, so look over and back in Matthew chapter 12, verse 9. He says, what then will the master of the vineyard do? This is, I'm sorry, I'm in the wrong place. I'm in Mark. I saw the MA and I got stuck. So, Matthew chapter 12, at least I caught it before too long. He says, leaving from there, Yeshua, he went into their synagogue. A man with a withered hand was there, and so that they might accuse him, they questioned Yeshua, saying, is it permitted to heal on Shabbat? So again, they're challenging him this time. And he said to them, what man among you will not grab his sheep and lift it out if it falls into a pit on Sabbath? Okay, what lesson or what is that teaching there in that moment? It's a very famous argument, yes. But, it's animal lives matter kind of a thing is what's happening. Because even as something that, because what is included in the original command about keeping the Sabbath? You're not supposed to work, your children aren't supposed to work, and your animals are not supposed to work. Right?
The argument is you yourselves would not allow an animal to suffer for the sake of the Sabbath. That's basically the argument. He says showing compassion to animals is part of the Torah. You would allow them to suffer on the Sabbath. How much? Then it goes to the depth of the wager matter.
Yes, and because we still go out and feed the animals on Sabbath too, and that would be that's work. I mean, sometimes some of these animals are hard to feed, but they still have to be provided for. But so things like helping an animal is acceptable on the Sabbath, and this is kind of an emergency situation. So unexpected things, when things happen that you're caught off guard for, you're not prepared for. Yes, you are permitted to do those things. But helping people, if helping an animal is acceptable, helping a person is even more. And he heals, he casts out demons, he does all those kind of things on the Sabbath, because who receives the glory from those moments? Is it really about the man, or is it really even about Yeshua? Who does he give credit for? He directs all of that toward the Father. He directs that to God. So that's one of the things that he's saying here. It's acceptable to do those kind of things. It's even more acceptable to help people on the Sabbath. Going back to verse 7, he's backing up. I'm backing up a little bit. He says, if you had known what this means, I desire mercy, not sacrifice, and you would not have condemned the innocent. So I desire mercy, not sacrifice. Again, that's implying the whole idea of you think the most important thing here to do is the sacrifice. But if even performing the rite or keeping the law means that you are lacking mercy, it's as if you're breaking it anyway. You know, you can go through the motions and have no mercy. You can let people suffer and keep the letter of the law. But I would rather you show mercy to somebody who needs it. You know, I desire mercy. That is, keeping the Torah should make us more merciful people.
That was the big difference between the house of Hallel and the house of Shema.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Hillel sometimes had too much mercy.
He had restrained mercy.
Yeah. Whereas Shammai had no mercy, or less mercy. So, and of course, Yeshua is trying to call them both back to what is an appropriate balance of those things. Then this is a passage that we read, Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath. What does that mean?
It means just what it said.
That's brilliant. Thank you for that wonderful commentary. So, Sabbath was made for man, and not man for the Sabbath. Man, and I had something I wanted to share here. Now I can't think of it.
Well, one thing, it means it's intended as a blessing, and it's something that's good and beneficial that we could appreciate. We weren't made.
Yes. So yes, Sabbath is not just a rule, or it's not just a thing that God puts this out here and says, okay, here you go. That's what I was going to say. I'll come back to it in just a second. Gabriel, you had something.
Well, in the sense of then at creation, when God rested, He rested for humanity's sake.
Mm-hmm.
In the sense of, He stopped for us.
Yes. We talked about that last week, in that Adam and Eve's first full day of existence was the day of rest.
It's though the Almighty was exhausted from doing all that.
No, it's not that. But I bet Adam and Eve were exhausted.
He said it himself.
Because, Adam was naming all the animals, right, on day 6. He had to go through surgery and have anesthesia on day 6. Got married on day 6. It was a big day. He got to sleep in. Right? And then he got to spend it with his wife. He was like, okay, what was your name again? But he also got to spend it with God himself. So the Sabbath was made as a blessing. And this is what stuck out to me, and this is what I almost forgot to say. The Sabbath is, a day that is holy. It's a day that is set apart. And what we have to realize is that it is set apart. It might be in the notes later, I don't remember. But it is set apart no matter what, right? Because who set it apart? He did. It is going to be set apart whether we keep it or not. But it is made and set apart for us as a gift to us, because our nature is we'll work ourselves into the ground. We will never. How many of y'all know people who are workaholics who will not stop? Yeah, McKay?
Well, I was just going to say, the thought came to me about, what if a person is doing the Sabbath because they feel like they have to? I mean, I think God's like, don't do me any favors.
Yeah.
That's what I would say.
Yeah. Yeah, go ahead.
Kelly, I liken it, I've said this before, I liken it to a tailor-made suit. A very well-made, tailor-made suit.
Okay.
That he made for man.
Okay.
And yet man takes that tailor-made suit and uses it as a throw rug to walk upon.
Or pajamas or something, yeah. I see what you're saying. It's made and it's fitted for a certain purpose.
You said it best. It was a wonderful gift.
Yeah.
Given from the Creator.
Yeah. So one of the things that we've seen and we've talked about as we've been looking through these verses, and there's even in that testimony of the guy in the Way documentary, when he first started keeping Sabbath, it's like he just laid in bed all day and didn't want to get up and get out. Anybody else seen that? And he thought that was what keeping the Sabbath meant. So keeping the Sabbath rest is not necessarily about doing nothing. There are a lot of things you can do and be a part of. You know, he says you are to do your work for 6 days, but on the seventh day you will rest, so that your ox and your donkey may have rest, and also the son of your handmaid and the outsider may be refreshed. Okay, that's the passage there. That idea of being rest or refreshed. Rest is to settle down, to remain, or to be quiet, to cause to rest, to give to rest, to let lie, even. And then refreshed is nafash, which means to take a breath. Just kind of breathe in and exhale and just slow down a little bit. How do we rest or are refreshed? Go ahead.
I was just going to say that it's interesting when you talk about the Shabbat and you talk about that rest, when you stop and think, we live in a very unique time and age because we have this at our disposal anytime.
We have the Scriptures.
We have the Scriptures. And for most of history, it was when you worked. And it was from sun up to sundown. For survival, you had to work for your own survival. And to take a day of rest, to be able to gather together, and to be able to go into a synagogue and to hear the word. Because you didn't have this. You weren't able to sit down and read it at your leisure. It was total refreshment. It was like, oh, I get to hear from God today. I get to be with His people. I don't have to do all this. Now, yes, today we do have this, but we don't need to. We have to be careful that we don't let having this keep us from coming together and being with Him and being with His people and hearing from the Word and taking that deep breath of, oh, I can put everything I've been doing all week long, I can just put it aside. Mm-hmm. And I can be with Him and I can be with His people and we can pour over the Word together.
See, so much of our culture is built around the concept of leisure and all of that, and yet we are running ourselves ragged all the time. And then, so when people do have a moment, they run off and go on vacation, come back more tired than when they left. You know, there's our concept of rest and leisure is really not how the Scriptures define things. But, you know, how do we rest and are refreshed? So, you know, doing whatever you want is more about treating the day as if it's the same as any other day. You know, we don't want to treat the Sabbath day just as another day to survive or whatever else. It's a day that reminds us that I have more to live for than just that daily grind. I have more to live for, that there is something more important for me to be a part of. And it's a reminder of those things. You have something?
I just was thinking of the scripture that says, in your presence is fullness of joy, at your right hand are pleasures for everyone. How you cut out. So what do you do to be refreshed? And I thought, certainly, focusing on Him and spending time with Him and being in His presence is refreshing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But you think of, like, he talks about the animals and the ox and things. for the ox or whatever else that you're working on a daily basis. You're putting the yoke on them, right? And you're making them do all that stuff all day. What is rest or refreshment for the ox? Is it to lock it in a pen to where it can't move? No. It's to let it go out and walk in the field and graze in such a way that it's not carrying that burden that it had been before. It's not doing nothing. You know, even when the shepherds and things with the 23rd Psalm, they make the sheep lie down in green pastures. And they do that for a period of time, but that's not necessarily the end goal for things. You know, think of a mother ox or cow or whatever else. If you close it up, but it has its young in there with it, is it rest or refreshing for the mom if the kids are sitting right there next to it all the time and antsy and crazy? And what do the kids want to do? The young ones, they need to get out and move around a little bit. Otherwise, it's not refreshing for either one of them. You know, it's those kinds of things. But doing whatever you want, treating it like any other day, is essentially living for your own kingdom, your own agenda, as opposed to God's kingdom or His agenda. You know, the priests were functioning and working in the temple, but that was not just there for themselves. That was for the glory of God. So you can do things more than what we can't do on Shabbat. We need to start thinking about the things about what can or should we be doing on the Sabbath. That's a better kind of a question. If we're just doing anything else, you know, does God get the glory, you know, in what we're doing? And that's a big thing. You know, what does living for the kingdom or kingdom work look like as opposed to regular things? And I found, in reading a few things, I found this statement here is two of them. A precept is a specific rule prescribing a certain action under certain circumstances, whereas a principle is a general guideline intended to result in different actions under a variety of circumstances. That's sometimes where the debates are happening. You know, here's the letter of what something says, and this is how it needs to be applied. Is it a precept or a principle?
So basically, you might have a precept or a ruling on something that stems from a principle.
Mm-hmm.
But the principle can be applied different ways at different times, maybe?
Well, you know, like those examples that we were talking about with the 8th day not doing any work. Well, somehow or another they were considering the act of circumcision an act of work. Somehow or another. And yet, they were still willing to do that on the Sabbath, even though if it's work, they shouldn't do it.
Well, the doctor doing it, it's nice, right?
Well, I'm sure they had ways of dealing with that, but you know and then the man is broken. He needs healing. Jesus does it. Yeshua does it. Because what's more important? What's that? The man is. You know, because the Sabbath was made for man. If you elevate the Sabbath over the man, you're getting things in the wrong order. We've been talking a while. I need to keep going just a little bit. So things that for the kingdom that we can do, that we should do, you know, things like worship. Is that about you or is that about Him? It's about Him. You know, serving others. I know, Harvest for Israel has their thing. When is the next one they're loading? The 28th. So the loading of a truck with all of these supplies to take over to Israel to distribute to the churches. That starts at like 8 o'clock in the morning. I'm okay doing that on Sabbath because that's kingdom kind of work. That's going to, but if it's just me, well, gee, my lawn, I think I need to go mow my lawn. That's about my life and my house, my agenda. Unless it's like a public nuisance. I don't think cleaning up my lawn is necessarily a kingdom work. Maybe if I get all of the scrapped cars, off of the blocks, and maybe that would be kingdom work. I don't know, because I have so many of those. But discipleship, studying His Word, looking into His Word, passing on the knowledge of the faith, teaching. Teaching can be work. You have to put a lot of work into doing it, and yet it's an important thing. Relationship building, fellowship. This you had to work to get here. What's that?
That's what I was going to say. It just occurred to me. When we come together as a body on the Sabbath, we have fruit of the Spirit. It's the Spirit. We have fruit. There may be people that need prayer. Maybe people that need healing. I think that's kind of maybe what He was doing.
Absolutely. For little kids, play and rest. Play is rest for a lot of them. And it's also relationship building, because like if you're as a father who's working all week, the only day that you have to spend with your kids might be the day that you keep the Sabbath. And if all they know of, Dad's going to keep the Sabbath, so he's going to sit on the couch all day and not talk to me, or do something else, or something still not with me, that you're missing out on some things that the Sabbath can teach. Anything else? What else kind of things can we do on Sabbath?
I just want to say in terms of the children and play can also be rest for them. It made me think again about the oxen when you talk about, them going out into the fields and just, they're grazing, they're out there, they're doing it.
They're not being controlled by somebody else. And how many kids, all those studies that they talk about school and things like that, that as they decrease recess because they think they need more time in the classroom performance actually goes down. And as they increase recess, or what we used to call recess and such, classroom performance actually went up. Because there's something about that allows them to do their work better. And which refreshes the body. And then that actually goes along with that is, if you don't keep the Sabbath, your performance actually lessens as far as the work that you do. There's been all these different kinds of studies on, the length of work days and things. And, 10 hours, 12 hours, you've seen people have shifts of longer than that. Well, there comes a certain point, and it might be different for each person, but that the quality of their work begins to go down the longer that they're working. So they might be efficient up to 10 hours, then after that it starts to go down. You may be keeping them longer, but you're getting less out of them. And so having a time of rest actually makes you better to work through the rest of your time. That makes sense.
The kids with the relationship building thing is real important too.
Yes.
To be able to meet other like-minded, feel like they're the only ones sometimes, where they want to do the right thing, but there's no one else.
Nobody else's mom and dad make me do this. Yeah, so there's some important things. Then we say this. This is Mark chapter 2. Man, we've already been talking a long time. Mark chapter 2. Let's say this together. Then he said to them, Sabbath was made for man, and not man for Sabbath. So the Son of Man is Lord, even of Sabbath. So we talked about the first part kind of already. But the Son of Man is Lord. And he demonstrated that. Who has the authority to say what is and is not keeping the Sabbath? So Sabbath is an example from the Father for our benefit. Otherwise, we'll work ourselves to death. We talked about that. It's also a delight, something to be treasured or looked forward to. That's the Isaiah 58 passage. And it's not supposed to be a source of frustration, contention, or dread. Sometimes you hear people talk about Sabbath is coming, and they're oh, yeah. You know, especially, kids can have that attitude because they don't get to do things that they always necessarily did. But it's not supposed to be a source of frustration, contention, or dread. And I think this is meant to be backed up a little bit. But if your children groan and hate when the Sabbath arrives, you're doing something wrong in how you're communicating and keeping things. But not man for the Sabbath. Sabbath is not holy because man observes it. It is holy because God made it holy, whether we acknowledge it or not. That's what I was trying to get at earlier. And so He is the Lord of the Sabbath. So the Son of Man is the one who has authority. It is His day, a day to honor Him, a set-apart day for Him and for His purposes. So when we talk about what is the Lord's day, right, this is actually the clearest statement of what the Lord's day is. It is the Lord of the Sabbath. He defines what is and is not keeping the Sabbath. And when He defines it, He will be consistent with the written word or never contradicting previous commands or revelation. Right? Because if Yeshua goes around and He's contradicting previous commands or revelation, previous Scripture, what does that make Him? Well, more than a hypocrite. Wouldn't that make Him a false teacher? If He is contradicting what God has already said, then that puts Him in dangerous territory that we don't want to go with. And He's the Lord of the Sabbath. He's the only one who gets to say what the day is. And see, I'm remembering what I wanted to say and not what I wrote. This is the only scriptural ID for what that day is. So I'm getting ahead of myself. And no one else has the authority to discontinue or change this day. Not the Pope, not the Church, not hundreds of years later. Don't have the authority.
Well, they say they do.
They say they do. And that's part of the challenge. And then I'm going to talk through these real quick. And why does the Sabbath apply even to us, even if we are Gentiles? Isn't that just for the Jews or the Old Covenant stuff? Y'all have heard all those questions and stuff before.
Born again, what does that mean?
Well, it comes with the idea of what does born again mean? Because really being born again is the death to your old life, right? And a new birth with a new identity. A new creation. It was a new life, a new way of life, a new creation, and in that is a new family, a new citizenship, and a new inheritance. That's what we all, we as the church or as the Gentiles and such, we love the idea of born again, but we downplay the significance of what that means and the implications of what being born again is. Born again to what? And that's where these Ephesians passages come from. When we talked about these a couple of weeks ago. At that time, you were without the Messiah. Let's say this together. Excluded from the citizenship of Israel and foreigners to the covenant of the promise, without hope and without God in the world. That was our condition. That was our status before being born again. Right? But if we are born again, now in Christ Jesus, you who were far away have been brought near by the blood of the Messiah. Okay? So all those things that it said previously about being excluded, foreigners to the promise, without hope, without God, all of that has changed because you've been born again. And in verse 19 he says, so then you are no longer foreigners and strangers, but fellow citizens with the saints and members of God's household. How do people in God's household live? What do citizens of His kingdom, how do they live?
According to God's instructions.
According to His Torah, according to His instructions. He's not going to have different sets of rules for His one set of children, such as that. And that is a foundation, built on the foundation of the apostles and prophets, with Christ Jesus Himself as the cornerstone. I hope all that makes sense, because that's really where it's all kind of going. If we understand what these things mean and what they are for and who our identity is, we are a part of that life, and keeping Sabbath and all those things is a part of it.